Hello, I'm Matt and welcome to Badger Workshop. Manomao are holding a competition called the Amazing Making Of. I met them at Maker Central and they twisted my arm into entering. So I've come up with a project that probably uses two things that sums up what I do, and that is reclaimed materials and booze. I have a place over the road from me that just lets me have all their pallets that have broken slats on them. So after breaking the pallets up, I joint one side using my jointing sled. Then when I have the one clean face, I can run that along the table saw fence and clean up the other side. With a stack of these done, I can run a bead of glue along the edge, and I'm going to glue up a whole panel, or several panels of these. The plan is to build a pirate's chest, but I don't have any treasure. I'm going to build mine around the dimensions of a cool box, so my treasure would be beer. Clamping them keeps all the slats tight together, but they have a tendency to bow, so to keep them flat I use some weights, and what I have is some railway line, and that on top of the clamps keeps everything nice and level. When the glue had dried, the clamps can come off, and then I ran it all through the thicknesser to clean everything up. Now I can cut everything to size. I need two side pieces, obviously the same length, and then the end bits are going to be slightly taller to accommodate the curved lid. I use my track saw and the Path Dog guide system to get perfectly 90-degree cuts on these boards. With everything cut to the correct length, I can then rip it to the correct height on the table saw. As I say, the end pieces are going to need a curve to incorporate the lid. Whenever I need to cut a curve, before I search around for the protractor, I have a look to see if I've got anything with the correct radius, and it just so happens this barbecue lid was perfect. I always like the simplest solution to a problem. I can then use the bandsaw to cut the curve out on both of the end pieces. A few weeks ago I did a video where I experimented cutting box joints on the table saw. Now this was the project I had in mind to use it on. So I mark out where all the fingers for the joints need to go on the side pieces. I have a baseline, which is the thickness of the material, and then I use this little saddle to join up the dots. So that I don't make any stupid mistakes, I scribble on which bits are the waste, and then I can take it to the bandsaw and start making the cuts. I start with the easy cuts, which are just the straight ones going down to the baseline, and then I can start removing the waste. The end piece is easy, because again, that's just a straight cut, and then the middle waste's a bit harder, going in at an angle down to the initial cut, then flipping the board over and going in from the other way. Last time I used a ruler to mark out the position of all the joints. This time I'm just going to use the side pieces as a template for the end ones. This makes the marking out much quicker. You just got to remember to cut the opposite bit of waste this time. Then I can take it to the bandsaw and cut all those ones out. With all the joints cut, it's time for the moment of truth, assembling. So first I've got to get some glue into all the joints. I found my little silicone brush for doing this, but I find my finger works so much better. With glue in the joint on both sides, the pieces can be slid together. It all went together pretty easily. I didn't need to use a mallet, which was good because this wood's quite thin and probably would have split. A few of the pieces just needed a bit of a push down with my hand. The good thing about these joints is they do tend to pull everything square, but just to make sure, I've got my Veritas clamp around it, which pulls it all perfectly square. I've got some more quick clamps on the top and left everything to dry. The top of the chest is going to be covered in wooden slats, but they need a place to be glued and nailed onto. I used the waste piece where I cut the curve and a washer to draw out another curve that was 1 centimetre shorter. You can then cut out 2 pieces like this on the bandsaw. These pieces get glued onto the inside of the ends, and then I use a few spring clamps to hold them in place until the glue dries. When I got the supports in place for the top of the box, I added 2 little strips at the bottom and glued and clamped these in place, and these will hold the slats for the base of the box. Now that all the supports are in place, I can cut all the bits for the top and the bottom. They're all going to be the same length, so I set up a stop block and cut them all at the same time. Started with the simple one first, and that's the base. So I added a bead of glue along those little supports I added. Then the slats can be put in place, and I use a few brad nails to hold them down. The last slat just needed ripping down on the table saw so it fitted. The slats for the top are slightly more complicated, as they won't butt up nicely together as they're all on a curve. So I angle the blade on my table saw to 10 degrees and put a 10-degree bevel on each side of the strips of wood. With that done, they can be installed the same way as the base, just glued onto those little supports and then a brad nail at each end. That's the shape of the chest complete, so I just give it all a sand down. Now the eagle-eyed of you might have noticed a small problem with that chest, and that is, how on earth do you get into it? Well, now for the scariest part of the build. Even though I've done this a few times before, each time it makes me nervous. I set the fence to the depth I want the box to be, and then run the chest through the saw 4 times, flipping it over. If everything works out, then the last cut will line up with the first, and everything will be fine. And thankfully they did line up, so we've got a perfectly matching lid to the box. A pirate's chest can't look like it's just been made, it needs a bit of age to it. And one of my favourite techniques for darkening and ageing wood is to use the blowtorch. On some woods it really brings out the grain, on this it just darkened everything up a bit and made it look very rustic and worn. While the wood was still warm, I got some dark brown wax and rubbed it all in. This gave it even deeper, richer colour, and I think really helped with the ageing process. I leave the wax to sit for about 10 minutes on the wood, and then I get my brush in the drill to give it a buff off. To finish the chest off, it needed some antiqued hardware, so I got these corner protectors, and added them to all 4 corners on the bottom, the top and onto the lid, so 12 in total. The lid also got some matching hinges, some matching handles on the ends, And a final touch, a metal catch on the front, with room for a padlock so I can keep all my treasure secure. That's it all done. The only thing left to do is take it outside into the sun and enjoy some of my treasure. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe for more videos.